Good evening, everyone. This is your moderator, Terry Song, checking in on February 24th, 2025. And this is the weekly webinar with Audubon Rights. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always wonderful to come together to learn and grow together. And we have been talking about the fact that there is just as much unlearning to do as there is learning. And maybe more, because it's taken you a lifetime to get here, and you kind of have to undo a lot of that lifetime. You certainly have to correct your status and become a publicly declared American. That's the first step. And for those of you who had a chance to correct your status last week, I'd like to be the first to welcome you home to the land and soil jurisdiction. Doesn't it feel good to be here? Yes, it does. There's no doubt about it. And it's getting better every day. And it's going to continue to get better and better. So yeah, this is the place you want to be. It's the only place you want to be. You couldn't be other places, but there's typically consequences, and you're a slave of some kind. You're a slave to somebody. So there's a lot of value add in being an American, a publicly declared American. And so let me do a quick screen share here and remind you about the ways to donate. And let's see, I need to get the right Word document forward here. Always have way too many windows open. Okay, that's the one we want to share. So we do need those donations greatly because things are happening very quickly, and we are having to pivot and respond very quickly to how the landscape is changing. And boy, oh boy, howdy, it has changed. So for starters, there's no Pope and there's no Pontiff. There's only the Patriarch of the West, whatever that means. And the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, is in shambles. And the corporation that supported much of the activities of the Holy Roman Empire is dissolved. Amazing. And now the territorial is having to scramble big time to resolve the Chapter 7 involuntary dissolution, and basically the Pope, that's what he signed up for at the time. Francis, he said, yep, we're just going to dissolve it. It's too far down the road and there's no way to pull out at this point. And that was after he called all the assets back to Rome and to Vatican Bank, before the bank was taken out. So that's quite a bit right there. Right then and there it's quite a bit. But there's more. Department of Education, gone. Bye-bye. Never to be seen again. Good riddance. And now we've got to get our what together and start educating our young people properly and not fill them full of all this BS that has been perpetrated upon American children. It's ridiculous what has occurred. Kids come out of school, they can't read, they can't write, they can't do arithmetic. They can barely form a sentence. They certainly can't construct a sentence, you know, or deconstruct a sentence. They don't even know the parts of a sentence. And so we have a lot that really we need to focus on with regard to our boys and girls. So there's that. In addition, Social Security is being ripped to shreds, as it should be. And the former head of Social Security is now gone. And they found out that there were something like, I don't know, 383 million people on Social Security. But wait, we only have 339 million people in America. How's that possible? Oh, yeah. So there's that. And of course, the good old IRS is being taken apart bit by bit. And hopefully, shortly, before we know it, it will cease to exist. Period. It shouldn't exist. It should have never existed. And it has always operated in fraud. And so the landscape out there is changing rapidly. It's changing greatly. It's actually an amazing time to be alive. And so, but coming back to the donation screen here is the fact that our Federation of States has a lot of area to cover out in international jurisdiction. And so they need the funds so that they can quickly put teams together to either begin doing research in a specific area or to continue work on projects that are currently ongoing, or travel to get some new data, new information, etc. There's a huge, people would be shocked if they knew all of the things that take place. And the, you know, some of the things at the most basic level is just the storage alone for the evidence, the documents, the books, etc. The storage alone is huge, and it has to be in climate-controlled storage facilities, obviously. And those are located really all over the world. So just that alone is mind-boggling. So if you can, the Cash App is the easiest for Anna to use, and that's $ capital A and N-A capital R-E-I-Z-E. And then I do want to mention that a lot of times the Cash App will get overloaded or hit some limits and that type of thing. So if you're not successful the first time, just wait 24 hours and give it another try the next day. And just keep trying, you know, 12 hours later or so, and eventually things will get sorted out. So if that's the preferred method for you to send money to Anna, you just have to be patient and work with, you know, the parameters they've given. And the second way is through the post office box. This is my favorite way to do it because I can send anything, and I send all sorts of things, you know. And so this is Post Office Box 520994, and that is in Big Lake, Alaska, and the postal code is 99652. Please, please, please be sure you put the postal code on the package. It's very, very important. So now I'm going to take you to the third method of donation. I have to get to the right place because, of course, I have way too many windows open. Let's just the way it is. And this is our American States Assembly website. We continue to do work on updating the website and providing other links and information as they come in. And so over here on the right-hand side in the gold bar is where you can donate. We've got all 3 options for donation that are listed here, but this third option is listed at the top. And this is how to donate into the store. It is a 3-step process. So you put the amount, and it doesn't say make a donation to Anna. I'll try to get that changed. But because we had one of our men who was looking for this donation link and pointed out the fact that it doesn't say for Anna. Okay, I will try to get that fixed. Here's the amount here, who it's from, that would be you, the state that you're on. You can type a message here, but to be perfectly honest, Anna never sees this. If you want her to see a message or read a card or, you know, just information that you're providing, send it to the post office box. It's the best way. So once you fill that out, click submit. It'll ask for your billing address for the card that you'll be using to make the donation. Click checkout. It'll ask for the card number and a final checkout. You'll be done. That's the 3 steps. Now you do not need to create an account. You can check out as guest for as long as you like. But if you will be using this regularly, you may want to do an account. It's just going to save you a few keystrokes, but that's entirely up to you. You are free to self-govern on that one. Just a reminder about our little store here. We appreciate your support. And we've got all sorts of goodies for you here, including the books and stickers and flags of all kinds. In our training, we have America's Some Assembly Required. And this is the executive level training, which with short focused topics. And then we have our foundational universal self-governance training. Every man, woman, and every boy and girl should take this training. It is that important. Really great information. And John Petruccio, who's pictured here from York County, Maine, patiently walks you through the information and just helps you see things that you may not have thought about before or you may not have been aware of. And we've all been there, believe me, including John. And so it's wonderful to break free of some limiting thoughts and behaviors and really just kind of bad habits. And a lot of it is the indoctrination from the corporate entities and the nanny state. So if you do decide to become an American, you're going to want this course. As an American, we keep the peace, we uphold the public law, we report crime, and it's really important for us to be the adult in the room at all times. So I can't say enough about this training, obviously. So let's go back here. And I do want to mention it's 6 minutes after Anna had texted me and said that she was going to be a few minutes late. So I'm just going to keep on talking until I see her come in. And that's why I have not yet paused, even though it's a little bit after 6. So if you're new to our movement, you'll want to start with the state coordinator on the American States Assembly homepage. This will bring up a contact form. Fill this form out, and this form, depending on what state you are in, will get you to the appropriate outreach path for the state. Every state is different. So you may have a family member or a good friend who has status corrected on a different state. The state that you are on is not necessarily going to be the same. So it's very important that you start here and get yourself into the correct process. It's going to be more more than enough for you to get the paperwork together and your witness testimonies and get copies of your birth certificate. So you want to make sure that you get off on the right foot from the beginning. And so once you filled out that form for the state coordinator, at the bottom of that, you'll see the next step, which is correct your status. And this will take you to the one-page declaration information. So you'll need 4 pieces of paper. You'll need the appropriate one-pager. You'll need 2 people who will sign their name, autograph their witness testimony to say that they've known you for 7 years. 2 different people. Now it can be anybody. It doesn't have to be a family member, but it can be. And you just have to have 2 separate people who will be able to vouch for you and say that they've known you for 7 years. And so it could be a grocery store clerk, it could be your barber, your dentist, you know, your best friend that you grew up with. It can be anybody. And so, and it doesn't have to be where you live. If you used to live somewhere else and you know people there, but you don't know very many people in the current state that you're living in, that's okay. Just go to the people that you know. They just have to have that document notarized, and that just means that someone will check their ID so that they verify that that person is who they say they are, and then they're gonna witness that man or woman signing the document saying that for 7 years. And then the last piece of paper that you need is a copy of your birth certificate. It's just a copy only. Now, in the old days, we used to have to do this rigmarole with our birth certificate, but we don't need to do that anymore. So if you happen to be reading older blog posts from Anna, don't pay any attention to having to get your birth certificate authenticated. Because the municipal is no longer in operation or functioning, we don't need to do that process anymore. And thank God, because it was a lot of work. So yay, we are making progress. Anna will talk about the 928s in many of her blog posts. They still exist, but right now you only need those 4 pieces of paper to come on the land as an American state national. If you want to continue to put on what I call your body armor, then you can pursue the 928s. For those documents that would be helpful for you. I personally love the 928s, and I couldn't imagine being on the planet without them. So, but you do only need those first 4 documents. So that is information about how you will correct your status. Under important information, we have other documents for you too. We've got an FAQ, frequently asked questions, continuing education. This is a place where you can study every day, and we recommend that you study at least 1 hour a day, because there is so much to unlearn, and then you have to replace that with the proper information, because we've been lied to about everything. They've lied to us about every single thing. And so it's a lot that you have to walk back, and it's a lot that you have to replace with the correct information. We also have a tab called Chart Your Course. And this has a whole bunch of information. Again, if you're new, I would probably go to why should I correct my status? This takes you through a step-by-step process that talks about the elements of the fraud. We also have Romley Stewart here, and he does a great job talking about the birth certificate fraud. And so we just go through the elements for you step by step. We also have the differences between being an American and being a U.S. citizen. It's important to understand the distinction. And we also have our coordinator training with Anna. Now, this is coordinator level training, but it's really for anybody. Anybody can watch this. Anybody can participate in the ongoing trainings. It started December 7th, 2023. We just passed the 1 year mark, or excuse me, 2 year mark. Oh my gosh. So this is great information. It is deep dive information into particular topics and subjects. And so lots of good information for you there. And then this walking through your fear is also an important course that you will want to take, because fear tactics have been used against you your entire life. And the tactics are pretty much the same. So we go back in history and we walk through the different fear tactics that have been used throughout the last, starting in 1000 AD, I believe. And walk that forward and help to educate you about the truth of the fear tactics. We also talk about the 21 universal laws, because that is part of what gives us our authority, the laws of nature, and the laws of nature's God. And so really important information for you. And we have all sorts of other goodies. And so Chart Your Course is going to be very useful and very helpful for you. And I was talking about the education page. So we're just going to go over to the education page right now. So I was on the home page. You just click here to continue your education, and it takes you to the educational page. Now we've got the book, you know, Something is Wrong When, and America, Some Assembly Required. We also have our training courses, Sign in America, Universal Self-Governance, and Some Assembly Required. We have the complete presentment before the Vatican Chancery Court. This is an amazing body of work that documents all of the fraud in detail that has taken place, going way, way back to the Sesticate B Act, and even prior to that, early part of the last century. And so, well, more than that, it goes back to like 1302. I think maybe even before that. And then we've got our basic committee structures. This is helpful for understanding committees that are in your assembly. We've got the Declaration of Flag. This was written by James Clinton Belcher, our hereditary head of state, and is one of my favorite documents. And the Testament of Anna Maria Reisinger, this goes along with her irrevocable will. This was a testament to her sons and daughters. And this is the brief report. And then we've got the 3 decrees over mandate. This was taking place around the beginnings of COVID. We've got our Declaration of Independence, which is what we stand under. And then we have the 3 constitutions, the contracts, the compacts, as in trash compactor, that are for the subcontractors. Okay, so moving on, we've also got the constitutionally repugnant Reconstruction Acts and help for veterans, um, evidence that all banks are broke, our Geneva Bible, which is the Bible that is for Americans, and we've got our constitutional enforcement seminar, the thick red line, which talks about no victim, no crime. And we've got our handbooks, the General Assembly handbook, the coordinator handbook. This is our one-page structure chart. And this is, you need to print this out and put it in your wallet and have it with you always. And here comes Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hello, Terry. Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you loud and clear.
Good, good. I can hear you too. Can't
Oh,
see you, but
good.
can hear you.
Oh, let me get my video going here.
There you are.
Yay. So, how are you?
Run ragged, I'm afraid. I was late this afternoon. I was all queued up and ready to go, but I got a call from the hospital where Jim is and gotten trapped in a rather lengthy conversation with his doctor.
Oh,
Anyway,
what's the status?
Well, he has another infection and
Poor
he's back in the
guy.
hospital. And this time they're discovering that the course of antibiotics that they've been giving him repeatedly doesn't work. Hasn't worked. Yeah, gee, I wonder that, you know. So anyway, medical faux pas upon medical faux pas among medical faux pas that lead you to feel like they don't know what they're doing, that they couldn't wipe their butts. And then you wonder why I can't give him an IV at home, you know?
Right.
But anyway, because that's actually all they're doing for him is they're, you know, pumping him up with fluids and a very simple antibacterial solution. So I don't know. Not happy. But I mean, the good news is he's responding well. He's coming out of the infection. But anyway, that's why I was late. I hope you all will excuse me. I have to take some time out of my life to actually take care of Jim and take care of issues like this.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the doctor didn't know I was due to be on a webinar at 5 o'clock on Monday. Anyway, that's it. How's everything going here?
Well, we were just talking about the 4 pieces of paper needed to correct your status, and we were talking about the educational page and what we offer for study for free to everyone. And yeah, so we were just kind of doing a little bit of extra care and education for people who may be new to the movement.
Oh, good. Well, that's always good reminders, especially for people who run aground on some of these yahoos are charging, you know, $3,000 to do paperwork that's free on the web that we offer for free that you can do yourself, or if you're not computer savvy, get one of your high school age family members or friends or neighbors to do it. You know, it's really senseless to be paying that kind of money for a very simple service that you could either do yourself or get a family member or a friend to do for free. And so I'll just kind of lay that out there and make it clear that yes, all that paperwork, all 3 pages of it is free to download and do it yourself. and you don't have to pay somebody big bucks to do a whole bunch of work for you. Anyway,
Exactly.
another misunderstanding. The 928s that we refer to are documents that are attached to Article 928 at my website, annavonrights.com. Okay, so, and they're all for free too. And early on, we did all of these different things because we had to kind of close all the gaps and possible misinterpretations and whatnot concerning what we were doing and who we were. And so we really papered up in advance of bringing the states into session, because we didn't want people here to be misunderstood or targeted by the the usual parties. And so our coordinators were asked to go through the 928 list of documents and get really papered up. But once we had established who we are, what we're doing, and all of that sort of stuff, that was no longer necessary for Joe Average to do. And so what we've developed is a very simple one-page declaration with 2 witnesses and some form of identification. And the identification doesn't get published, so you don't even have to worry about your privacy or anything. One of the things that's happened over the past few weeks is that the birth certificate is no longer a valid form of identification in this country. So you can no longer use your birth certificate to identify who you are.
Wow.
Right.
Well, I mean, so for those who don't know about the birth certificate fraud, is this an admission of guilt?
I think it's an admission that the whole issue of citizenship is up for grabs and is being brought into question. The birth certificate used to be an ironclad proof of U.S. citizenship. Not so much who you were, but that you were a citizen attached to the United States Corporation. Well, now there is no United States Corporation, and all of those corporations that were named after you by the municipal corporation have been rolled back, if you will. They have kind of fallen like dominoes into the lap of the USA Corporation and the British territorial estate that was the precursor to the municipal estate. Okay, so we've got this multiple part devolution of estate trusts. We have the municipal estate, I should say, the municipal estate trust, which was a Cestacay trust that was operated by the municipal government, has collapsed. It's being dissolved as part of the bankruptcy settlement of that United States corporation. And so the receiver of the United States Corporation is the USA Corporation. And the USA Corporation also has estate trusts that they created in our names, but they're the estates of purported British merchant mariners, so that they could establish salvage rights and estate interests in the property of an intestate British territorial citizen, a U.S. capital C citizen, who was a British subject working in an occupation in maritime and admiralty jurisdiction. And so they made up this person and they made up this estate in your name. And right now, the assets that were held in the municipal estate trust are going to this British territorial seaman's estate trust. He or she has been missing, lost, don't know what happened to him. They just disappeared over the horizon, lost at sea since you were about 7 years old. And in any event, the estate trust is collapsing into the British territorial trust, and now the name of the game is to dissolve the British territorial trust and knock it all the way back to your original American estate, which they converted unlawfully and without anyone's knowing consent into an American infant descendant estate. And why they call it a descendant estate is confusing. You know, you hear the word descendant and you think, oh, dead, right? The infant died in infancy and was intestate as a result. But no, there are more ways of being dead than that. The infant descendant estate results from the fact that your mother, acting under conditions of non-disclosure, not realizing what she was doing at all, waived your original birthright American estate. And when you waive an estate, when you say, oh, I don't want that, I was born with it, but I don't need it or want it, then it becomes an infant descendant estate. It's as if you died. You waived your right to your birthright. So it's just it's more crookedness, more fraud. And it then allowed them to impersonate you and seize upon your good name and use that as the name of a British territorial corporation. Okay, and so it's all just fraud. It's all horrible fraud. And impersonation, personage, barratry are the crimes most closely associated. It's unlawful conversion, personage crimes, including impersonation and barratry, which is knowingly bringing claims against such a person. Now, when we hear the word impersonation, we often think of impersonating an officer, right? Well, there are other kinds of impersonation. The word person itself has been converted to mean something above and beyond its normal usage. In their usage, the word person means corporation. So when you impersonate someone, you enfranchise them, as in Dairy Queen franchise, and their name is used as the name of a corporate franchise that is owned and operated by a parent corporation. Okay? So we've seen some examples of impersonation in this sense when you see companies like Abercrombie and Fitch, Sears and Roebuck, Edward Jones, people, Elizabeth Arden, okay, people do use their names as the name of a corporation named after them, right? So the practice isn't totally unknown, but it is not by any means very common. And yet they use this as their excuse to impersonate us and to name corporations after us and to operate these corporations as if those corporations were us. Okay? So it's a fraud scheme. It's a crime of personage. And what this does, well, the reason they do it, is that it allows them to create a brand new corporation in your name in a different jurisdiction under a different law. And that crime is known as unlawful conversion. Because you start out in a lawful state of being as an American, standing on American land and soil, and having a birthright estate as an American, and then they unlawfully convert your identity. They basically steal your identity, and they convert your identity unlawfully into the identity of a different person, a British territorial person operating in a completely different jurisdiction of the law. And this person is a British subject and is subject to different forms of law than you are, and also has different duties and responsibilities and obligations of their citizenship than you would ever have. So this is a process of unlawful conversion, impersonation, identity theft, and following that, they use their own court system to practice barratry, which is a crime of bringing a claim against such a made-up, phony person, right, before the bar. Barratry, bar association. You can see how this is all connected. So anyway, these are crimes of personage, crimes of unlawful conversion, crimes of unconscionable contract with your mother since she signed the paperwork without full disclosure, and since you were also unconscionably contracted because you were just a baby when this happened. You had no knowledge of it. Your mother had no knowledge of it because she didn't have disclosure. And so it's a completely unconscionable contract for a form of foreign citizenship that nobody ever intended to adopt. And that's the unlawful conversion.
And this has been done by popes and the Crown Corporation, the monarchy.
Yes, the Brits did this to us. And so, a lot of Americans think that the British are our friends. The British government has never been our friend. The British people, yes. There are many wonderful British people, and we cherish them. But their government is completely, absolutely, 100% corrupt and evil, and has been for hundreds of years, as we have been able to trace back and prove to everybody's satisfaction. So anyway, the Brits have got a rotten government, and their rotten government has usurped against ours. And in the middle of this fraud and fiasco sits the victim of all this crime, the living people. And unfortunately, it didn't stop with Britain, it didn't end with Scotland, Ireland, England, and Wales. It went beyond that to the Commonwealth, and the same cancerous fraud scheme then leaped the gap and came across to the United States, and it has continued to grow. This same evil criminal contracting and unlawful conversion scheme has been applied in the 17 Western European nations that were occupied by the Allies, and in every other country where there's been an incursion ever since. I should say a successful incursion of this system ever since, which includes South Korea, Libya, Iraq, anywhere that they were able to get a toehold and get a bureaucratic system set up where they could make these obscene, illicit citizenship claims and continue to operate on the basis of a mercenary conflict being a basis for their claims. And actually, that too is incredibly unlawful and illegal. We discovered that the American Civil War wasn't a war, it was a mercenary conflict. It was never declared. It was never ended by any peace treaty. It is, and to this day, is a mercenary conflict, and it's illegal as hell on our shores. So, there are many things that we've uncovered and that we are bringing forward into public consciousness. And it is affecting not just our country, but it's affecting all of the countries that have been affected by this. So it's not just us. It's the Canadians, it's the Australians, it's the New Zealanders, it's the home countries of Britain, it's all of Western Europe, it's every
India,
country that we've
Africa.
ever invaded
Yeah.
since the Civil War.
Yeah. So much. It's just mind-boggling, but it's the same fraud scheme.
It is. It's the same fraud scheme throughout. And one of the characteristics of the fraud scheme is a giant bureaucracy. And this, actually, when you get to studying back into history and where all this came from, back in ancient times, every person was considered to have 4 bodies. You were, your physical body was the earth body. Your emotional body was the water body. Your mental body was the air body. And your energy was the spirit body. So there were 4 bodies that were assumed to contemporaneously exist and to inhabit or be integrated with this one physical body, right? And this is where
the roots of Chinese medicine, right?
Well, it's global. It's a concept that isn't just Chinese or isn't just European. It was adopted globally. You find it in India. You find it in everywhere in the ancient world. It was the common knowledge that people had 4 bodies. And if you had 4 bodies knocking around, one for each of the principal elements of earth, water, air, and fire, then it's just a hop and a skip from that kind of concept, that idea, true or not, to the idea that these separate bodies represented separate persons. And you see, they kept playing with this basic idea of multiple persons in one person to create these corporations. Once they got to the concept of a corporation, then they could start this use of persons and personage in a different realm, in a different vocabulary that was similar enough so that people were deceived. And so the word enfranchisement is another good example of this. They talk about enfranchisement as if it were something really good, right? Oh, you get to vote. Enfranchisement for women. Enfranchisement for, Negroes. And but they were using it in a different sense. They weren't talking about voting rights. They were talking about enfranchising you as a corporation, as a franchise of their parent corporation, so that they could seize upon you and your natural assets, your body, your labor, your land, your capital, your money, everything. They could seize upon you and unlawfully convert you and claim that you voluntarily adopted capital U dot, capital S dot, capital C, British territorial United States citizenship, as if you were born in Puerto Rico. and then, it was a great thing for them to steal you and everything that you owned as a indentured servant. And then the Pope came along after that and said, "Oh, gee, we see what you're doing here. Ah, well, let us in on the gig. We're here to get our share. Where's our 60%?" And so then they also additionally made up this additional person and named a municipal corporation franchise after you, just like a Dairy Queen franchise. So they use words in duplicitous ways. That's why the Native Americans who had to deal with their forefathers called these people forked tongues. You know, they talk out of two sides of their mouth. They say this word and it means this over here, and they say the same word and it means that over there. And then they use this to confuse people and defraud them. So this is why also the Puritans, who came here seeking religious freedom, called them masters of deceit, and they would not let bar attorneys live in their communities. If bar attorneys wanted to move into the same area, they had to establish separate little towns outside the Puritan communities, because the Puritans simply would not stand for all of their verbal deceits. So we're just dealing with the same thing now. We were not given this history. We were not taught any of this history. We had to go dig it out for ourselves, often at great expense of time and effort to do so. But we did. And so now we know precisely what we're dealing with. We know how they did it. We know who did it. We know, obviously, why they did it. And we're in the process of unraveling it according to the maxim of law. As a thing is bound, so it is unbound. Okay, so we are at that point where, much to their surprise, we're claiming the British Admiralty estates. We're claiming those British territorial U.S. citizen estate trusts that were assigned to completely theoretical British mariners. And that's causing a huge, huge problem for them, because normally what they do is they collapse the estate trust from the municipal to the British territorial, or from the British territorial to the municipal. And so one of the colluding partners is always holding all the goodies. And we're breaking that mold. We're saying, no, we're here. That's our estate. We're over here standing on the land and soil of our birthright, and we want all of our goodies back. Okay, so they pretended to be our trustees. We are the donors. What are they going to do? They don't have a choice. So they have to give us back our stuff, and we are taking it all the way back to America. We're not letting the Brits continue to hold and manipulate our assets for their benefit. And that is creating a huge, huge kerfluffle. They took all of our gold and silver offshore and used it as collateral for their benefit for years, for decades. Since the Civil War, they've been doing this. And now suddenly they have to make an accounting. And suddenly, when the Americans look for their gold, it had better well be right where we want it and where we put it. Otherwise, there's going to be major, major upset, and the theft will out. All of it will out, and they'll be sitting there going, "Oh, we're thieves," And so you've heard that the Bank of England has been emptied out. Well, that in part is because of us, and in part it's because of other people, other countries especially, coming forward and demanding money that they had on deposit, or gold bullion that they had on deposit with the Bank of England. But the real push is that the Americans are going to go to Fort Knox. And what are they going to find at Fort Knox? Well, they won't find the bullion that they left there in, 50 years ago. They will find Bill Clinton's tungsten bars painted with gold paint. We already know what's there. We already know, back during the Clinton era, we know exactly what to expect. Yes, Bill Clinton tried to pull that one off. Anyway, so yes, the Bank of England is being gutted, and if we have our way, the Bank of Scotland is going to be gutted. And unfortunately, so is the Bank of America and the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada is going to get it for colluding and taking part in the birth certificate shuffle. And the Bank of America is going to get it for holding on and promoting the mortgage fraud.
What about Wells Fargo and Chase?
JP Morgan Chase, the progenitor, the author, the source of all of this fraud, has become the gold and silver arbiter of the world. They have become the gold delivery service and the exchange, the gold exchange and the silver exchange. And all of this is stockpiled under Jamie Dimon. And part of the reason is that all of the different hereditary American trusts, like the V.K. Durham Trust, which is immense amounts of silver, and the Avila Trust, which is immense amounts of gold, have all been falsely seized upon by the USA Corporation through this enfranchisement process. And so when this gets blown all the way back to the Americas, they're scratching their heads and they're wondering, well, what basis or where are we going to be? Because they're British territorials. And so their stuff remains under the thumb and forefinger of the king. And they can't own land in America. And all these other things come crashing down on their ears. So I'm sure that there is growing awareness of the fact that all they're going to have here is a job, and they'd better do that job faithfully and well. And if they don't want to do that job faithfully and well, they're going to be kicked out, and other people will take over. So anyway, it's past times at Ridgemont High for all the guys at Washington, D.C. at this point. There's everything going on 6 ways to Sunday. You may have noticed that President Trump is signing hundreds of executive orders. So let's take a little pause and for everybody who hasn't really thought about this, our country never had any executive orders from 1776 to 1863. It operated for almost 100 years without any kind of executive order. So what is this thing called an executive order?
It's corporate.
Abraham Lincoln, the source of most of this rot, issued the very first executive order in April of 1863. And I will score 100 points for anybody who can tell me what that executive order was.
General Order 100, executive order. That became the Lieber Code.
Everybody else who said what Terry said, or who just looked up from their dinner plate and said what she said, you get 100 points on the Grana scale, because that is exactly the truth. Abraham Lincoln just came out of the box the day before he bankrupted the USA Corporation of that time. He issued the Lieber Code, which made the U.S. Army responsible for our money and various other aspects of administration, and set up this entire Lieber Code as the framework under which to administer the peace and which was then used to give authority to the president of the new corporation that was taking over in this corporate handoff between the colluding foreign federal subcontractors.
Wasn't it used to also pay war reparations?
Oh yeah, all that stuff was covered. Lincoln was concerned that the army would just go through and rape and pillage, like General Sherman did when he marched from Savannah to the sea and just wiped out everything in its path. Lincoln didn't like that. Lincoln didn't like General Sherman at all. He recognized that Sherman was efficient and that he was a good officer, but he didn't like him. He did not trust him. And so he, adopted this Lieber Code as a means of directing the Union Army's administration of the southern states, especially after a peace agreement was reached. And so he had almost 2 years to go before that peace agreement was reached, but he at least had the foresight to set forth how the administration was supposed to take place after the hostilities ceased, and to protect the people of the southern states to the extent that he could. Okay, so we can give Lincoln some kudos and some decency points for at least adopting and enforcing the Lieber Code before he bankrupted the Civil War era version of the United States Incorporated, which he did the following day, right after he issued that first executive order. Thereafter, he continued to use executive orders as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army as a means of directing and continuing to operate what was then the government. Okay, they had usurped against our government. They had substituted themselves as our government. And they then went forward and got into a bind and had to bankrupt their corporation, right? And even despite that, they used the armed forces that had been converted into mercenary forces. They used the armed forces and the office of the commander-in-chief to continue an administration, a military administration and occupation of this country. Now, this wasn't legal. It still isn't. And so the executive orders are orders of the commander-in-chief to the military. And so all of these executive orders that you're seeing Mr. Trump just, day after day after day, pumping them out, it's because that's the only means that he has left to exert any control over the military. And then the military, of course, enforces against everybody else.
Thank you for that explanation. And I do have to say that some of those executive orders are just what the doctor ordered.
Oh yeah, he's been playing wild and woolly with the pen and creating all sorts of problems for these jurists that have been hired by Joe Biden. They keep trying to use the power of the courts to censor and restrain Trump, and it isn't working because, number one, 9/10 of what he's doing is being promoted as a result of the bankruptcy of the United States Corporation. Mm-hmm. He has to carry through these audits of all these agencies and departments in order to settle the bankruptcy in Chapter 7, involuntary bankruptcy of the United States Corporation. Mm-hmm. At the same time, his own corporation, the United States Inc., is insolvent and is under Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization. So what he's had to do is draw together a consortium of billionaires to operate a completely new version of United States of America Incorporated. Only this time, instead of it being just incorporated as a commercial company, it's being incorporated as an LLC. And that was done in London quite recently. So what you've got is an LLC, and Trump is a member of this LLC. Elon Musk is a member of this LLC. Larry Edelman is a member of this LLC. Peter Thiel is a member of this LLC. And they've basically taken over running the government services aspect of all this while these bankruptcies are being sorted through. Now, their anticipation, of course, was that all of the assets from the estate trusts would domino into the Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and those assets, those extra assets, would put the United States of America Incorporated right out of its Chapter 11 bankruptcy, reorganize it, and poof, it would be this brand new, beautiful thing with all sorts of extra money because it would be able to pay off its debts using the municipal estate trust. It isn't quite working that way because the thorny little Americans have woken up and gone, well, we didn't agree to be U.S. citizens of that kind. And, we are exercising our reversionary trust rights as the presumed donors of all these American descendant estates. We're not dead. And so it's really throwing a monkey wrench into the plan and into the way that these guys have been doing business for 100 years, because they've been colluding together and doing this kind of, what would you call it? A pass off, like in a football game where these two players come together and you can't even see how fast the football is transferred from one set of arms to the other set of arms. Well, they've been doing that sort of thing with our assets. They've been passing it from the municipal trust to the British Territorial Trust. Then the British Territorial Trust has divvied everything up again and given the Pope 60% of the take and kept 40% of it. And they've just been going back and forth like this for 150 years. And so you can imagine how disconcerting it is to all of a sudden have the Americans wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's our stuff. It's on their ledger seat because they defrauded us and pulled this unconscionable contracting spiel. Hello. So executive orders are being used to command the military. And the military is then writing herd on all the other beasties out there. Part of what is also going on is that as this information has been expanded and everybody has become more aware of what's actually happening, other countries have become aware. And there's an ongoing effort then to sort it out worldwide. Because as I say, it hasn't just affected us, it's affected all of the former Commonwealth countries, it's affected all of Western Europe, and it has affected countries that you wouldn't even suspect of having a system like this, like Japan, which was overtaken in World War II, and South Korea. So, I mean, there are a lot of countries that have, one way or another, gotten into this same cow pie, and they're all trying to shake free and get cleaned up and resume operations on an honest basis, or at least a quasi-honest basis. You'll notice that Mr. Trump isn't telling you what's really going on. There's not a word coming out of his mouth about the United States bankruptcy. There's not a word about the USA Inc. being in receivership itself. There's nothing to tell you anything about the new version, the British territorial version created in London of the United States of America, LLC, by this, pack of billionaires. And so, he's not being honest with you either. But he is at least cleaning up his side of the fence. His operations are being forced to go through this giant audit of the former United States corporation. And it's going to result in his administration having to go through all these agencies, all these budgets, and pick and choose. Because if they don't fire these federal employees, they have to make use of them and pay them themselves, right? So expect that somewhere around 1.5 million federal employees are going to get dumped in this process, because the military organization is not set up to pay for and maintain and direct all these civilian agencies and departments. They're not even going to be able to use all of that. And on top of that, they're being forced to look at it in terms of the Constitution, and the Constitution doesn't allow for 9/10 of it. So, I mean, everybody's up in arms in the Democrat side of things. They're all going, "Oh, USA, our prize cash cow. Oh, you can't possibly destroy USA." Okay, well, yes, he can. And in point of fact, he has to, unless he wants to pay them. And he doesn't want to pay them, believe me, because he's got enough problems keeping the old USA in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So, no matter what you do, what you're going to see is they're going to get rid of all these federal agencies, and employees in many departments are all going to get axed in a wholesale fashion. And, there are going to be naive Americans all over the country going, "Oh, thank God, our savior, Mr. Trump, has come to save the day, and he's getting rid of all of these departments and all these agencies and all this oppressive micromanagement and enforcement of 80 million codes and all this craziness." Okay, well, yes, he is, but he doesn't have any choice, number one. Number two, he wouldn't be doing this if he didn't have to. Nobody would do this if they didn't have to, because whether you're getting credit for it from one side or blame from the other, it's a hell of a job. It's expensive. It's a pain in the butt. So nobody has done it in 150 years, and nobody would do it, except that it's an involuntary bankruptcy, thanks to, guess who? George Bergoglio, Pope Francis.
Well, Patriarch of the West, Francis.
Yes, Patriarch of the West, Francis, who paid dearly for doing it, but did it nonetheless. And he was doing it to protect the church. So both of these characters were acting under constraints that they needed to act this way, because in order to protect the church, the Pope had to act. In order to protect the interests of the United States of America Incorporated, Trump has had to act. And in order to get through all of this, Musk has had to be hired, or someone like Musk, to go through and actually do the auditing and to competently track the money through the computerized data systems. And so don't waste your time being afraid. Don't waste your time blaming Trump or idolizing Trump or Musk, either one. This is business. And the most profitable and correct way to view this is it's just business. And so what you can expect is around 1.5 million federal employees are going to hit the bricks and enter the unemployment statistics. You can also expect for dozens. I mean, I expect probably in the neighborhood of 300 out of 450 federal agencies to just disappear. So they won't be there. You know, all these things that you think of as things you've seen all your life simply will cease to exist. And it won't be clear who or what, if anything, takes their place, because they were doing things that were not necessary in the first place. They were doing things that were not constitutional. There was no constitutional mandate for them to be doing these activities. Or they will be axed because they were doing illegal things, like misappropriating funds that were allocated for foreign aid relief. Okay, so a lot of these agencies are going to be taken down because they were doing illegal things. A lot of them will be taken down because they're extraneous or they're doing something that was not contracted for under the Constitution. So you're looking at, say there's 2 million federal employees. You're looking at the loss of between 2/3 and 3/4 of the federal workforce, and between 2/3 and 3/4 of all the agencies and departments. I mean, this is not going to be a small downsizing. This is going to be the mother of all downsizings, because the federal bureaucracy was so incredibly huge and bloated.
Well, the Social Security statistics alone were mind-blowing. They had 300, and this isn't exact, but they had something like 389 million people who were collecting Social Security, but we only have 339 million people who live in America.
Yeah, even if you were to count all the expatriates who were old enough to draw Social Security or who had survivor benefits, it wouldn't account for it. Not even close. And the Social Security Administration is presumed to have known that. I mean,
I can't believe they'd even admit that.
well, and what choice did they have? They didn't have any choice. You know, Donald Trump, as the receiver in bankruptcy, has to perform the audit.
Well, another one of those agencies that I found out about this week was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Which was not protecting consumers.
No, it was protecting the criminals.
Right. So, like I say, a lot of these agencies and things will just disappear because they were engaged in criminal activities. USAID has to be taken down because it was misappropriating funds.
How about the SEC?
Yeah. I mean,
how about them? Securities and Exchange Commission?
Yeah, well, they were securitizing living flesh by pretending that it was a corporation when they knew damned well that they were attaching assets that belong to living people.
Right.
IRS, they were guilty of the same thing. Personage.
Right. Terribly.
You know, pretending that we were U.S.C citizens when they knew damned well we weren't.
And then making up stories about you and your activities.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, and they did it to everybody.
I know.
False dossiers. The whole history of false dossiers got its start with the Internal Revenue Service, creating all these false dossiers for each and every one of us. And all of these dossiers, in one way or another, connect the victims to some aspect that is controlled by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And I gave the example of the master file they had on me that I examined, where I was supposed to be a middle manager of a rum distillery in Barbados, and my husband was supposed to be dealing in surplus arms sales in South America. So you see, they were claiming that they were claiming an interest in my activities in labor and whatnot under the authority of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tax, and Firearms, rum distillery, alcohol, right? And they were claiming an interest in my husband's activities and regulatory authority over his person for dealing in surplus arms sales in South America. And it's the same way in every single master file in the entire IRS litany. They made up all of this outrageous crap about what we supposedly were engaged in and claiming regulatory authority over us using alcohol and tobacco and firearms regulations, federal authority to regulate those items, as an excuse for the IRS to, claim that there was a regulatory role for Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms with regard to our activities, when of course there wasn't. But Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, you see, has armed enforcement, and the IRS doesn't. So what the IRS was doing was setting this up so it looked like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had regulatory authority over us, and they then could use their armed enforcement to carry out these raids on people that the IRS singled out for attacks. You've all heard about how the IRS shows up at this business and they go in and they seize the computers and they lock out the employees and they take everything. They just steal everything. And they do this with armed officers wearing flak vests and sidearms and badges and the whole 9 yards. The IRS wasn't actually doing that as the IRS. They were doing it as deputies of the BATF. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was sharing their armed enforcement with the IRS, because the IRS had these master files concocted, these false dossiers, claiming that we were engaged in all these things that we weren't engaged in. False dossiers. And
Is
so,
the IRS going away?
oh yeah. Well, the IRS, the whole thing, the federal income tax was always illegal for Americans. They couldn't enforce it on us. They admitted that early on. It was ruled unconstitutional. So then what the rats did is they turned around and they enforced it as a payroll tax on federal employees. It turns out that was illegal too, because you can't enforce a kickback tax.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. So anyway, the federal income tax has been a boondoggle, a hoax, a fraud from day one. It was enforced on federal employees as a quid pro quo kickback tax as a condition of employment, which the rats and vermin continue to describe as a privilege. Federal employment is a privilege. Did you realize that? A privilege. We would call it
privilege
something
to be
else.
a slave.
Yes. Yes. So anyway, they pulled it off by enforcing it as a condition of employment for federal workers, and then they just conveniently claimed that we were all federal workers and we were all federal franchises.
So are people who have been just relentlessly harassed and attacked and had assets and money stolen by the IRS, are they going to have any kind of remedy that will become available through Doji or through, some avenue?
Um, well, they're going to have to get rid of the IRS no matter what they do. They'll probably try to retain the initials. So, Trump already alluded to this. What was it he was calling it? Not the Internal Revenue Service, but the External Revenue Service. He was going to, turn them all on to collecting tariffs instead. It'll be interesting, but they have to get rid of the IRS because it was always illegal. It was illegal to, set up a quid pro quo like that and demand a payroll kickback in exchange for federal employment as a condition of employment. And it's illegal entirely for them to be collecting any kind of federal income tax from Americans who don't get $1 in federal income. Misrepresenting or mischaracterizing private earnings as federal income is based on the whole enfranchisement scheme, which is bogus as a $3 bill. And so we are at that point in human history and reality where all of this begins to unravel. And as a result, the times are very chaotic. And, a lot of things can go sideways in an environment like this. We have many inroads with the Trump administration at this point. And one of the really deeply disturbing things is the air jurisdiction and the way that the air jurisdiction continues to confuse issues. We have people in that inner circle around Trump who are Christians, and they are ignorant. They are profoundly ignorant.
And deeply, deeply indoctrinated.
And they influence Trump. And they are pro-Zionist. And they continue to represent the air jurisdiction. They don't know their own history. They don't know the church history. They don't know religious history. They don't know much of anything. And yet they are very opinionated. And they're doing things, for example, mischaracterizing me as a new ager.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, not everybody had to grow up dodging cow pies out in the pasture.
Well, I'm just imagining you with
flowers in my hair.
Yeah, a headband on, flowers in your hair,
crystals, bong in the background. No. Far too hard-headed for that. I'm afraid. But yes, I'm. According to them, I'm a New Ager and a follower of Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey.
Oh my gosh, come on.
Yeah, okay. They're saying this out of the blue, purporting to know. They're telling this to Trump and others around the Trump circle.
And well, hopefully he's not stupid enough to listen to that crap.
Well, apparently he's pretty damn stupid if he could be duped about COVID-19. There's certain, we all have our blind spots, right? Well, if you could believe COVID-19 narrative, why wouldn't you believe that that Anna is a New Ager? That's, people say these things. I mean, where in the hell are these purportedly Christian people who are not supposed to bear false witness? Where are they getting this? Well, what possible justification could they have for saying that I'm a New Ager? I mean, until very recently, I was a lifelong member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. And although I do know about Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and the entire movement that they spawned and spiritualism in the 19th century and a great many other things, no, no, not a New Age person at all. I may be a mathematician, I may know physics, and I may be on the cutting edge of all the things that we're learning in both of those fields, but I am not a New Ager, and I'm not a hand waver, I don't believe in things that go bump in the night for no reason, okay? I'm looking for what caused the bump. So, just for your amusement and awareness and to put it in the public records that that's what they're telling Trump about me. And these are people who don't even know their own religion.
Sure.
They don't know
They
that
haven't
Jesus
figured out that Israel isn't a state and it's,
Yes, and that Judaism is a religion, not a nation. Hello? And that the whole name Jesus is a Romanized version of Zeus. And that Christ means the anointed one, which is an office of the old Babylonian Phrygian religion. I mean, come on, Christians have been sold a bill of goods here. If you're a follower of Jesus and you're adopting what Jesus taught, you should know that Christ is an office, and it means the anointed one, and it was an office among the Samaritans of a priest, a high priest in the old Babylonian religion. Now, does it matter to me that they adopted Yeshua and his teaching and accepted him as a priest and anointed him? Hell no. I mean, does it offend me if someone decides to cheer for the Green Bay Packers? No. Doesn't offend me, doesn't affect me. If I like the Green Bay Packers and they like the Green Bay Packers, that's all the same with me. And so if they like the teachings of Jesus and they honor Jesus, fine. I'll just continue to honor the teachings of Yeshua as teachings, as a man, not an office, and certainly not an office in a foreign religion. So anyway, these people don't know anything, and yet they're advising Trump. They're telling Trump in good faith that I'm a follower of Helena Blavatsky with no reason to think that. And, these are the sorts of communications issues, and this is what happens when there's lack of transparency and there's lack of communication. And people just start using whatever comes to their mind or whatever suppositions they have and present it as truth. And that is not what we're here for. I would not dream of characterizing them as ignorant of their own religion, except that they're still parading around preaching and baptizing in the name of Jesus Christ, which literally means in the name of I am Zeus. the Greek god, right? I am Zeus, Jesus, right? Christ, a high priest in the ancient Babylonian Samaritan religion. That's not what Christians think they're doing when they baptize their children. I'm sorry, they are being defrauded. They're being deceived. And I'm here to tell you, I don't trust any incorporated church. They were given a choice between honoring God as king and honoring Caesar as king, and they chose Caesar. So I have no patience with them. I have no respect for them. And I also observe that they are, as I put it in an email today, the kings of Waha. They talk, 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 and do nothing. You know, they obviously knew about the abuse of U.S. aid. They obviously knew that money that was earmarked for the benefit of poor people in the third world was being siphoned off and misappropriated to benefit other parties and causes entirely. They knew because they were at the trough. They didn't go to the members of Congress and raise the alarm. They didn't go to the members of Congress and complain and say, hey, you know. And why didn't they? Because they were there filling their own gullets with all of the largesse that U.S. aid was spreading around. They're hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
They're crooks. And they've deceived you into calling yourself a Christian without even knowing what it means. You've been led to think that that means that you're a follower of Jesus, that you are committed to Jesus, and they don't even tell you what Jesus means. They don't tell you about Yeshua. You know, they don't tell you about the grimy Jewish prophet. No, they tell you about Jesus, Zeus, and they tell you about the Christ, the office, but they don't tell you what the office is. They deceive you, just like Satan deceives. And this is what they've done. They're responsible for these corporations masquerading as governments. If the churches had stood up against that, it would never have happened. Not any of it. They're responsible for the idolatry of money. Isn't it apparent to everybody hearing this that what you're carrying in your wallet is a graven image? Printed off engraving plates? And what does it say? No graven images? You will, you know. We're not that far away from the golden calf here, folks. And yet you can't see that this is idolatry. I mean, think about what an idol is. You think of it. Okay, there's this little statue, and you venerate it and pray to it. That's idolatry. Okay? And most people know that. Most people think, yeah. And this is irritating as hell to me. Christians make fun of people that worship idols, you know. They make fun of people in the South Pacific who have little tiki gods, or you know, people in the Orient who have statuettes of Kunling, or you know, they make fun of idolatry, and yet they're idolaters themselves. They have idols everywhere. They have Jesus still hanging like a piece of dead meat on a cross. They have all these statues of the Virgin Mary and the saints. They have all of these idols everywhere. And they pray before, they pray to, they do all this stuff that's idolatry, and they don't know what idolatry means. They've heard the word, but they never really bothered to look it up and realize that, hey, I'm practicing idolatry. I'm an idolater. And on top of that, I'm stuck in this system of money, and money is an idol. And who really makes the money from all of this? Who really benefits in terms of land and commodities and everything else? Omar, the idol maker. The little guy in his print shop, just printing it off. Costs him 4 cents to produce a bill, and it doesn't matter if the bill is $1 bill or a $100 bill. He'll just make all the difference. And he'll keep collecting on his IOU, his unsupported, undefined IOU that doesn't have a due date and doesn't specify what you'll be paid, if anything. How about some more hot air? How about the good faith and credit of Congress? And then ask yourself, which Congress? We have been the victims of fraud on an unimaginable scale. And the chief purveyors of this have been the religions. So even though what Yeshua taught is true, the religion itself is not. And we have proof of it. They have taught you to pray to a false god, Zeus. They have taught you to accept a false office, Christ, which is an office of priesthood in the Samaritan, Babylonian, pagan religion. They have tolerated and even promoted idolatry and the use of money everywhere, and the proliferation of the use of money in every possible guise. And they have, even on top of all of that, these purportedly Christian institutions have said nothing against usury, the collection of interest on debts. They have done nothing to provide a jubilee in 800 years. If any of these people were truly knowledgeable, they would be aghast. But they're not. It's worse than the blind leading the blind. It's the crooks leading the blind. And today, Mr. Trump signed an executive order basically making it illegal to be anti-Christian. Okay, well, guess what? I would say that no such thing exists. I would say that no such thing exists because all the Christians who think of themselves as Christians have been defrauded and fooled into calling themselves Christians without understanding that they are thereby proclaiming to the world that they are supporting the office of Christ, a foreign priesthood, in an ancient pagan Babylonian religion. I know no Christians that would ever in this world ever dream that they were professing that. I can guarantee you that there is not a single member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Black River Falls that would understand what that meant and say that in support of it. They would not call themselves Christians anymore. They'd call themselves followers of Yeshua. If they knew the truth, they would say, yeah, that guy, that Jewish carpenter, he had it all together. I'm with him. They wouldn't say anything about Christ or Isus. And now, if you have ever read the New Testament, and you can find me a passage anywhere in it where the character of Yeshua, the rabbi, claims to be Zeus, show it to me. And if you can't find a passage that says, hey, I'm Zeus, I'm the Greek god of the air, I have the thunderbolt, baby. If you can show me that, then I will agree with you calling him Jesus. Otherwise, you need to get your facts straight and stop going around baptizing people in the name of Jesus. And you need to stop teaching people to pray in the name of Jesus Christ. And you also need to stop teaching them to say amen at the end of every prayer, because that's like sending it to a dead letter box under the address of Amun-Ra, the sun god of ancient Egypt. I don't know how in the hell all of these supposed great learned masters of all these religions, all these archbishops, all these pastors, all these ministers, all these people that spent 18, 16, 20 years in seminary don't know this shit and are still out there preaching and telling everybody what to do and acting as our moral guides when they're just sitting in the back room sucking it up. Pardon me. I was defrauded just like you. I grew up as a good little girl in a little Midwestern podunk town, and I went to the Evangelical Lutheran Church faithfully every Sunday. I sang in the choir. I studied hard in Bible school. I went to the Sunday school. I read my Bible, and I guess that's where I really fucked up. Because I read it. I actually knew what it said. All the way from Genesis to Revelation. And I have a good memory. I recommend it to all of you. Actually take that book down off the shelf and read it. And after you get done with one version, oh, by the way, the Catholic version is copyrighted as a work of art. Just thought I'd let you know that. And then compare it. Read a couple different versions. And as you go along, your brain's going to go, what? That doesn't sound right. And you're going to go back and you're going to check it against that other version, and it's going to say something quite substantially different. And this is especially going to be true between the King James Bible and the Geneva Bible. And there's going to be an even bigger jump between the St. James version, the KJV, King James version, and the NIV version. And by the time you've got done reading 5 or 6 different versions of the Bible, your brain is going to be spinning and you're going to go, what the hell is true? Just saying. And then if you start reading any of the forbidden books, the Apocrypha, some of which is included in the Catholic Bible, and some of which isn't. But if you start reading some of these other books, like the Book of Ruth, the Book of Esther, the Book of Enoch, you're really going to be thrown for a loop. The Book of Thomas, you know, all of these ancient books. And then when you start reading the really ancient versions of those books, you're going to see things that you just can't even imagine. How did they get from this to that after the Council of Nicaea? Well, I'll tell you how they got there. They took out their little pencils and markers and they changed things. They changed a lot of things. There are over 20,000 changes between that book on over my shoulder there, that great big fat one, that's the Geneva Bible. There are over 20,000 changes between the Geneva Bible and the King James Bible. And there are just as many or more changes that have been made on average for all of the ancient books of the Bible. So what you've got as you're reading it is a tweaked, twerked, distorted, dark mirror version of what was ever said in ancient times. But at least read it. Do yourself the honor of reading it and knowing what it says, so that some fancy Dan charlatan can't come dancing into the room with a song and dance and feed you a whole bunch of garbage. Because that's what they're doing. They are selling you a whole bunch of hokum that is deliberately twisted and bent to give you the false impression that is going to give them power, coercive power, and give them seemingly moral supremacy. And it's all just hokum, what they've done. I'm not saying that the teachings that you associate with Jesus are hokum. Eternal truth is eternal truth. And there is eternal truth in the Bible. But you're going to have to sort. You're going to have to think. You're going to have to discern. You're going to have to bring all your powers to bear, or you're just going to get it glossed over and shoved down your throat like Aunt Mamie's favorite cough remedy. Okay? It's a lot more work and it's a lot more study than most people are ever going to want to put in. But most of all, it's more thought. Now, if you go to any conventional church, anywhere in this country anyway, they're going to teach you about Jacob the patriarch. And they're going to tell you right to your face that Jacob and his mother, Rachel, who was a bitch, decided that he should have the birthright and not his brother Esau, who was by a different mother. Okay? So they say. I'm not sure how they could have twins or near twins and be by a different mother, but that's what it says in the really old version. Anyway, so Rachel, the mother, and Jacob conspire together to fool the father, Isaac, who is old and blind, by putting animal skins on Jacob's arms so that his arm feels hairy like his brother Esau's arm. And the old man, unable to see, blesses the wrong son and transfers Isaac's birthright, which was Isaac's, to the wrong kid, to Jacob, the liar, the cheat, the little skullduggery, nasty bastard, Jacob. they tell you this story, and they tell it with a straight face too, that Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a pot of porridge, stew. Well, that's very interesting because last time I looked, you can't sell something that you don't own, that isn't yours, that you don't actually have possession of. And in fact, Esau never did actually get his birthright from his father, did he? So Esau couldn't sell something he didn't have. And he didn't have any birthright from his father at the time that he purportedly sold it for some porridge. It's all bullshit. All of it. You've been sold a big, big, big bill of goods here. You know, you've been given the wrong impression about so many things. Esau couldn't sell his birthright because he didn't have his birthright at the time. And Jacob was nothing but a thief and a liar. And that's why he was beloved by who? Not by God, by Satan, the father of all lies. Just saying, folks. So Jacob was not beloved by the God. He was beloved by a God, who just happens to be the father of all lies. And Jacob just happened to be a liar and a thief. Think about it. I thought about it the first time I read the story, and I was like 7 years old. This doesn't make sense. I went home and I faithfully sat down and I looked at my grandmother and I said, this doesn't make sense. Why would our Father, why would the God of all truth, justice, and right, why would the God who created this wonderful world and made it work with such clock-like precision so that everything is beautiful and everything comes in its time and everything, how in the world would our Father condone a liar and a thief and say that he loved him? And my mother and my grandmother chuckled. They just chuckled. They were so delighted with me. They went and gave me the head rub. They thumped me on the back. They sat me down at the kitchen table and said it was a moment to celebrate, that I had a brain. I had a head on my shoulders. I was going to follow on the old track. They gave me an extra baked apple that night because I'd been smart enough to figure out that the Lord of creation, the author of all truth and justice, would not like Jacob, a liar and a thief. That the father of all lies had to be the one who loved Jacob because guess what? Jacob was a liar and a thief. I'm sorry, folks, you've been sold a bill of goods. The words may be true, but the interpretation sucks. Start thinking.
That's a great story, Anna.
Well, start thinking, you know, all these Christians, I meet these Christians and they're just so pathetic. They've never stopped to think about what they read, if they read it. They're just kind of following along going, well, I don't know about this stuff, but if you say so, Pastor, I'll trust you. You shouldn't trust anybody with your immortal soul. You shouldn't trust anybody who lies to you. You shouldn't trust anybody who talks with a forked tongue and on one hand tells you, oh, don't judge, but then goes ahead and judges and gossips and no, when you see things like this, that's your Shinola system should be going bat, 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 and you should just go, this is where we have the parting of the ways. This is where we don't go any further down that track because we know that person is a liar. Or we know that person is so ignorant that they're not a reliable guide. You know, even if we have reason to believe, and we often do, that the person is innocently ignorant and misleading you because they don't know any better, it still means that they're misleading you. And whether you go down the wrong track in ignorance, or whether you go down the wrong track because you're a crook and you like the deceit, it doesn't matter. It's still a wrong track.
Yeah, unfortunately, known a lot of Christians, and they're all very, very, very heavily indoctrinated.
Well, I need to think. They need to look at the story of Jacob and Esau with new eyes. They need to really sit down and think about what they've read and what they know about God the Father versus the Father of all lies. It's necessary. And they also need to think, I think, a lot about this misrepresentation, first and foremost, of Yeshua, the carpenter of Nazareth, as Zeus and as the Christ, both. If you stop a moment, you'll see that there's the reality, there's the man, and then there are these two offices, or these two other persons that have been created. And he never called himself Zeus. He never made an allusion or said a word about Zeus. Why would he adopt the name Zeus? Why would anybody attach the name Zeus to him? Only someone who did it in deceit or in ignorance. And why continue a deceit or an ignorance?
Because you're a crook.
And why did anybody in the Bible call him the anointed one? Sure, he was anointed. They brought the special anointing oil. His feet were anointed. We know that. But where does it say that he was the anointed one in the Bible? Where do they use that office? There's a difference between the act. Sure, I can anoint my feet tonight. Hey, look, I have some special holy oil from Israel. This is the real stuff that they talk about in Deuteronomy, and this is it. This is what they were supposedly using as, to consecrate the temple doorways and to, blot on the heads of the priests. This is it. There's a recipe for it in the Bible, and this is it, made in Jerusalem. Okay? I could anoint my feet tonight, and I could call myself the anointed one. But let it stand for the record that Jesus never, your Jesus, my Yeshua, never once claimed to be the anointed one. Ever. Show me that. Show me a quote where Yeshua ever said that, ever claimed that, ever accepted that. And all you Catholics out there, which includes the highest Catholic clergy, hi guys, I know you do listen to my broadcast every Monday and report back to the popes and the curia and what the hell is she doing now. Okay, you can tell them that too. I just don't say it myself, and I've read lots of different versions of the Bible. Never once saw him call himself Zeus. Never once heard him say that he was the anointed one, as in the office in the Samaritan church. And if anybody has any other information or any proof that he did, you know me, I'm always all ears. I'm always looking at everything. I'm always trying to figure it out.
Well, I hope that felt good to get off your back.
Oh, really,
Yeah,
you
I can
know,
tell.
if there's one subject that gets me wound up and tail twisted, it's when somebody calls me a New Ager and a follower of Helena Blavatsky.
I think we're going to have to do a mock-up of you as a hippie girl. I think it'd be really cute.
A witch, maybe, a hippie girl, never. But, even though I
Oh my
spent time in Haight-Ashbury, no, no, no.
Oh
No,
God.
no.
No, no, no.
You know,
No, not there.
the thing is, when you start realizing that you've been lied to about religion, you've been lied to about history, you've been lied to about your own government, you've been given a name as a present, and it's been stolen along with your identity when you were about 3 weeks old, and that you've been victimized by this horrendous gang of crooks playing different roles and pretending to be different things and been deceived about so many things. I mean, you get to the point where, like me, your Shinola sensor is worn out practically. It's like it's in constant high alert. And you really get very skeptical. I mean, I'm sorry. I know that there are people out there. I know there are Republicans out there that are, worshiping at the feet of Donald Trump about now and feeling so relieved and so happy and are so trusting and just, it's like he has a halo over his head, right? But I know, and you should know, that he's just doing something that he has to do anyway as part of the bankruptcy settlement. And you should know that he and his pal Elon Musk and these other billionaire buddies have set up the United States of America LLC. And you should know that they are in the process of this football maneuver where they're handing over the municipal assets to the territorial government. You should know the reality. You should be dealing with a full deck. And if he's really going to be honest and really going to be your proponent and not just your employee, then you need to know. He needs to be telling you whether it's politically advantageous or not. I mean, I'm sorry. I meet people who pretend to be war heroes, like John McCain. He was no war hero. And John Kerry, no war hero. And they steal the valor. It's called an act of stolen valor. They steal the valor of people who actually did go to war and who actually did sacrifice and who actually did risk. And that offends me. It offends me deeply on behalf of those who did make those sacrifices. And this whole thing, it's like a stolen valor issue where, you're here cleaning up a bankruptcy, and even though it's the biggest bankruptcy ever, okay, take laud for cleaning up the biggest bankruptcy ever, but explain to people what you're doing. Explain why you're doing it. Explain right up front. Well, we got to get rid of 2/3 to 3/4 of all the federal workers, departments, and agencies because number one, most of it isn't constitutional. There's no mandate in the Constitution allowing us to provide these services. And number two, we can't afford, we being the USA LLC, can't afford to hire all these people and put them to work at some legitimate purpose. There you go. See that? United Kingdom.
The U.S. Department of State oversees buildings. Really interesting. Yeah, it's too bad that they're not coming out and just telling the truth. And, you know, just this is what's going on.
Right.
That's why
Make a
this
clean
is
breast of
happening.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't leave people worried and wondering and thinking this is a political coup or, you know, and all this talk about Trump's revenge. Well, I'm sure he's taking some revenge, but the point is that he may be getting some personal revenge for what he went through. But the fact is that the only reason that there's anything there for him to act upon is because the people were crooks. Joe Biden is a crook. Hunter Biden is a crook and a pervert, and we have the proof in abundance.
Yeah, you wrote the article about the whole pandemic and, you know, calling for action. We have all the evidence. We've got the patents. We know who, we know where, we know when, we know all of it.
Right.
And we've got the results, you know, showing the excess deaths.
Millions and millions and millions and millions of excess deaths. Isn't that a nice little bit of wordsmithing? A nice little bit of euphemism there. Excess deaths. They had to coin that just especially for the results of the COVID-19 operation. Excess deaths. But my favorite of all time is that photo of the little old lady holding up her newspaper from 2011. Forced vaccination, the answer to world overpopulation, right there, Bill Gates going, or rather I should say, that creepy, geeky, horrible man, that criminal, that lizard. Why is he still walking around? Why isn't he in some psycho ward somewhere, bouncing back and forth against a padded wall? Somebody out there, come on, tell me, why isn't Bill Gates in either prison or 6 feet under or in a padded cell? Why isn't that madman collected and gone? There it is, depopulation through forced vaccination. The zero carbon answer. Hoo-hoo, zero carbon, right? And this is only made possible because they have redefined you as what? A transhuman, a genetically modified organism having no rights at all, according to them. Behind your back, of course.
Right. And, you know, you're a carbon being, but they want zero carbon. Excess death.
Excess death. When I was in 4th grade, I had a teacher named Doris Condy. She was a Scotswoman, or a Scotswoman, I should say, who lost her true love in World War I and never married. And she hated euphemisms. She absolutely hated euphemisms. Every time she would hear a euphemism, someone saying they passed on instead of they died, she would about come unglued. Her stitches would melt. She would just, you know, And if you heard Trump the other night, where he was raging and rampaging and swearing, just as I have, by the way, just because he was so tuned up, talking about the border crisis and how he would watch these people mass marching across our border, he'd say, I hate it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I just hated it. I hated it so much. I just hated it. And so I decided to run for president again, in spite of my better nature. You know, I get like that. I get to the point some days where I just hate euphemisms. I hate euphemisms. I hate it when I hear people saying deceitful things. I hate it when I hear doublespeak. I hate it when I hear gossip. I hate it when I hear people just talking about things as if they knew when they don't. And they don't even realize that they don't know. I hate it. I hate it because I know that we're all capable. We're all able to think, and we're all able to look these things up, especially now with the internet. You've got instant resources to pick and sort through for yourself and make your own decisions. And, you know, I know we're able to do this. And yet there's so much that just gets accepted as if it were the word of God, when in fact it's the word of Satan, or it's the word of Saint Jerome, even worse sometimes, I think. Yeah. And we don't question it all. We just kind of go along like little kids. Okay, I'm in kindergarten. I have to stand in this line and wait my turn. And we just have this mindset that, you know, we're like little kids, that we're just doing what we're told. Oh, you know, I killed that nice man, and I gassed his wife and his child, and I carpet bombed Gaza because, well, somebody ordered me to. Right? What kind of adulthood is that? What kind of, you know, manly, self-responsible person does that? I have a lot of respect for the guy that resigned from the top of the Israeli military, because he just got to the point where he couldn't do it. He knew that he was carpet bombing and genociding all these people, tens of thousands of people, with all these horrible high-powered weapons that USAID and other organizations stole, created, and sold to the Israelis. And we're supposed to keep our mouths shut? We're supposed to applaud Benjamin Netanyahu's government? No, 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 no. We're supposed to use our own heads and our own eyes and see that they carpet bombed Gaza and killed tens of thousands of innocent civilians for no reason. The entire attack that they staged as a false flag that MI6 bought and paid for Hamas, just like these funky damn bureaucrats that USA funded ISIS and Al Qaeda, and then spent more of our money fighting what they created. While MI6 bought and paid for Hamas using our money too. And Hamas went in there with the collaboration of Netanyahu's, I call them Netanyahu's, government. Do you know that on that particular day, the Israelis laid down their defense perimeter? This is a defense perimeter that is normally so tight that a turtle can't crawl across it without the Israelis knowing. But on that specific day, October 7th, they laid down their defense perimeter so that Hamas could attack and viciously and violently kill slightly more than 1,000 people. And then The Israelis used that as their false flag excuse to go in and carpet bomb the Gaza Strip, taking out all the infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals, the schools, the sanitation facilities, the water, everything, and killing tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian people and anyone else who happened to be there. And then these hate-filled raging monsters, these crazed animals, continued. They didn't even leave these people alone after they were dead. They continued to harass funerals of Palestinians. They're scum. They're scum. And we're supporting them. And Trump, going along and apparently believing his advisors, religious and otherwise, is supporting Netanyahu because he's got a good business deal, because he's gotten in on the refinery business and the new canal. I'm sorry. That shows an astounding lack of both character and moral fiber on the part of our, worshipful president.
And he sent over even worse bombs that'll take out concrete bunkers.
Yep, he just sent over 2,000 bunker bombers.
Yep. So coming back to, and we're running long, we're going to have to wrap up here. But I just want to ask the question, what court is going to prosecute these crimes? The Faucis, the Gates, the Netanyahus, who is going to prosecute these people? And
well, right now they're being prosecuted and they're being eliminated by military tribunals. And really, the military tribunals are the only ones that are in operation and competent and capable of doing the job, because it's going to take. They prepared this whole situation as a scenario based on the French Revolution. And I'm not the only one saying this. There are all sorts of analysts that are unrelated to me that are saying the same thing. What they had in the French Revolution was they had a king who was out to lunch. They had courtiers and members of the clergy around the king who were siphoning off money from the French national treasury and blowing it on all sorts of stuff. And they were impoverishing the French middle and lower classes to do this. They were doing all sorts of assizes and church taxes and all sorts of stuff. They were absolutely bleeding the people dry. And finally, the French people had had enough, and they attacked the bureaucracy and the king and everything to do with it. And they had this gigantic bloodbath known as the French Revolution. And as you probably do recall, for at least distantly somewhere, you have seen guillotines, and you've seen the little old lady there with her knitting needles, watching the heads fall in a basket and going, okay, right. Sometimes I feel like that little old lady, by the way. But anyway, they were literally setting this up for a French Revolution scenario. They wanted a gigantic, violent uprising that they could come in and play the hero and suppress. They even had 37,000, and this is the honest truth. They had 37,000 guillotines imported into this country and distributed around to all the FEMA camps and to all of the administrative hubs and FBI facilities and everything. 37,000 guillotines.
I've read that as well.
Right. So they were really literally thinking that this was going to be a French Revolution scenario complete with the guillotines. But in answer to your question, Terry, it's the JAG courts, it's the Admiralty courts, and the military tribunals attached to them that are actually doing the work of doing the trials and doing the sentencing and carrying out the execution. And at this point, that's the only option there is. And you'll notice that they're doing it within the territorial jurisdiction. That's why they're using Gitmo.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of information that comes out about Gitmo, but I don't believe the majority of it.
I don't either, but this is the scenario. This is, if these people are going to be tried right now, they're either going to be tried vigilante style, Western justice, or they're going to be tried by military tribunals. Now, bear in mind that we have the ability to set up our own military tribunals. Any 3 officers can be decommissioned in their service and recommissioned in our service, and they then can function as a land jurisdiction military tribunal. And you've seen, curiously enough, Hollywood gave us a great example of this in Lonesome Dove, where Jake Spoon is hung along with the man burners and horse thieves.
You often talk about Lonesome Dove.
I like pig.
Well, I think, you feel that it's a good example to educate people on a couple of things. Number one, guilt by association.
Right. And also the way that the marshals in the old days on the land and the military officers after the Civil War operated.
Right. Yes. So, okay. I mean, in a way, I, of course, am asking at this point a rhetorical question because nobody has an answer. Otherwise, it would be occurring, right?
Well, the problem is the Admiralty courts can only operate in the territories and high seas. They could, in theory, they could have a boat standing out past our coastal waters, and they could have a boat on the high seas, and they could use that as a floating court, and they could take them out there and do all their do the business out in real true Admiralty jurisdiction.
Right.
But they can't come on land and do that. When
Right.
they come on shore and they actually nab one of these yahoos and take them, they're not just taking them to a specific facility here on land. Their only
Right.
safe spot to operate is the District of Columbia.
Sure.
So, when it comes to those high seas Admiralty courts, they're looking at being on the high seas or in the territory. And that's why you hear about Gitmo. That's why you hear about Diego. That's why you hear about all these other places that
Right.
they can set up Admiralty courts. They can't do it on our states.
Right.
They can do it to some extent in the District of Columbia, but again, you've got the Admiralty on land issues. And one of my researcher friends, just thank you, John, looked up all of the special Admiralty definitions. So military tribunals can be used to try these animals. But we also have the ability, through a reflagging and decommissioning practice, we also could set up land jurisdiction tribunals.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And so So anyways, well, we are long, but I know that we do need to remind people. Sorry, I still have a terrible cough, so go for
I'm
it.
doing my begging posture. It's been a rough week, let me tell you. We're still pursuing some incredible advances with the banks. We're still pursuing some heavy-duty legal actions and some very, very necessary diplomatic outreaches. And we're still having to pay for everything ourselves. Plus, I'm not able to do much in terms of assisting and supporting the effort financially anymore because of Jim. So please help me make up the slack here. I can't be in two places at once, as it were. And I'm sorry if I get too passionate sometimes and rant and get angry, but I just feel like I'm slogging through a sea of lies. You know, everywhere you look, there are things that have been grossly misrepresented. Everywhere you look, there are things that have been omitted that were important that we should have known. And there are misrepresentations and deceits. We're just covered in them. It's like slime. And, you know, it's hard not to some days just get worn to a frazzle with it, especially when you find it in religion. I think that is an even greater betrayal than when you find that kind of stuff in government. I mean, everybody expects politicians to be scumbags, but you don't necessarily think that your local pastor or your priest or, you know, somebody that's supposed to be a religious authority or somebody who is standing up for moral rectitude is going to be a liar. Somebody who's going to mislead you, someone who's going to tell you to do things that aren't right or to believe things that aren't right or even to use names that aren't right. You know, it's really very disturbing.
Well, that's why I made that comment earlier that all of this fraud, all of this stuff has been done by monarchs and popes
Yep.
because this deception has been going on, 1302.
Yeah, it's been going on. I would say even before that, I would say that the church problems began with the Council of Nicaea and the quote unquote marriage of the church to the Roman Empire.
Right.
I think that's where an awful lot of the misrepresentations began. And I think that prior to that, it was, again, it was a Republican kind of thing where it was just local communities of believers getting together and you know, I think the thing that really muddied the water was the Council of Nicaea, where they started tweaking and twerking and adding and omitting scriptures. We recently found out that many of the letters of purportedly St. Paul weren't written by Paul the Apostle. They were written as homages, meaning in the style of St. Paul, by another guy named Paul of Ephesus, who was a friend of St. Jerome, who was in charge of the interpretation and translation of the books and selection of books that went in the official scriptural canon. So, you know, they were presented to us as if they were written by the apostle, And some of those things attributed to Paul the Apostle were clearly these homages that were written by a rather misogynist fan of Paul, a guy named Paul of Ephesus. And has the church come clean about that? Have they identified which of these letters to Paul were actually written or written from Paul? Which Paul they were talking about? I mean, isn't that just typical and rich that you got two guys named Paul, and so they just kind of gloss it over and add these letters from Paul and leave you to think it's Paul the Apostle when it's not. It's Paul of Ephesus, not Saul of Tarsus, but Paul of Ephesus. You know, things like that, when you find out, it just has such a demoralizing effect, like finding out that your baptismal certificates were being used as trading chits to be traded on a black market in souls, that they latch onto your baptismal certificates and pretend that this is an ownership certificate for your soul that they can trade for money on a black market. I mean, I'm sorry, folks, that's right up there with the sale of indulgences, where rich people could give the church a big clump of money and get a free pass to sin for a year. You know, it's just, it's repulsive, it's repugnant, it's demoralizing, it's outraging, it's just one of those things that the more you learn, the less you trust and the less you like. And the more these institutions just beg to be destroyed.
Absolutely. It's, you know, once something becomes institutionalized, it is, that's where the indoctrination is strongest. And we have a lot of those institutions that came from, you know, the Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes, Purebright, you know, that whole thing. All of those institutions need to be torn apart, ripped apart, and scattered to the four winds so that nothing like that could ever be created again.
Well, I think the best way to do it is to seize their money and their land, and just then they don't have any power. They don't have any ability to keep promoting it. And at the same time that they're passing on to their children all this garbage, we can be busy passing on to our heirs the truth. And, somehow the truth has a way of being so flat-footed, just like the example of Jacob. When a little kid says, but mommy, he was a liar and a thief and he betrayed his own father, the truth has a way of just being so obvious once you see it.
For sure. But, a lot of people really struggle with our history. That, number one, that people could fight in a war and not know that it wasn't a war, that it was just a mercenary conflict, that they were fighting for one corporation or the other, but it was two corporations fighting against each other. And that just blows people's minds.
Well, they're familiar with the term mercenaries. They're familiar with the term mercenary conflict. So they should know that such things exist. And then ask them, even in the present day, how many of them, if they were signing up in companies to go fight in what they thought was a war, and the place established for them to sign up was a state of North Carolina facility, or a fort or someplace that was run by the state of Georgia or the state of Ohio, would it click in their brains that the state of Ohio isn't Ohio? How many people now today would know that there was a difference between Ohio and state of Ohio.
Not very many.
Not very many. And so these people who signed up to fight in the Civil War, they went to these, what they thought of as government offices. And the paperwork said state of Ohio or state of Illinois. And they thought that was their government. They had no reason to be aware at that point that there was a very, very significant difference in kind and in jurisdiction and in identity between the state known as Ohio and the state of Ohio. So then, as now, there was this blurring, there was this ignorance. They did not know that when they signed up with the state of Ohio, it was any different than signing up with Ohio.
Yeah,
They didn't
that's
understand.
no, but the context of it is kind of the end result. It is, what do we do so that this never happens again? How do we ensure that? Education, for sure.
Well, our government has already been grossly privatized, right? So what we do is we have a public government. We very clearly identify it and delineate the public versus the private and make it obvious. Same thing with the court sessions. The only reason they've been able to get away with running probate courts in America is that they haven't, the judges wear the same black robe no matter what. Whatever jurisdiction they're in, they're always in a black robe, okay? So if we would make the judges wear robes that declared openly what jurisdiction they were operating in, we could get rid of a lot of the skullduggery that goes on in the courts. There's one simple answer to that. There are a lot of things we could do like that that would educate people and make it obvious what was going on. Just like, Mr. Trump could tell you about the United States bankruptcy and clear up an awful lot of confusion and fear and politicking both pro and con. Once you have this stuff down, once you know what's going on, you can, in theory, correct it. And you can also make the government very much smaller so that it's easier to keep track of and monitor and provide proper oversight for.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And, just know that we're all thinking about it. And, we want, as we're building our 4 pillars, we want to build them solidly so that we're not leaving any gaps or any cracks for what has gone before to happen again. So
right, and we're going to have to guard ourselves as the first and second generations from falling back into our earlier indoctrination.
right, and have solid successor plans.
Right, because that's how the first effort failed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have to get those kids in and start teaching them early.
Early as possible.
Yep. And I know my remarks today are going to upset some people, and it's going to make an awful lot of people who are Christians stop and scratch their heads and think.
They should. They should stop and scratch their heads and think. And they need to go back and read the Bible.
I think so. I think, we have more Bibles in this country than any other place on earth. But the statistics show that most people just leave them sitting on the shelf year in, year out.
Mm-hmm. Or in the drawer,
Yep. Well, folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with me and my rant tonight. I just had an awful lot of kind of disappointment and distress boiling up from, kind of recounting the disastrous frauds that have been perpetuated upon us, both by these organized, incorporated religious institutions and by the government. And I wanted to get it out to you too about what the executive orders really are, and what is really going on, so that you're not frightened and so that you can prepare. Our banks are keeping close in tandem development so that we'll be ready when the push comes to shove, and you will have what you need. And that's, the driving force behind everything else that we do, is to make sure that in this chaos, and it is chaotic, that average people will not be harmed. And, again, if you get a check from the government for $5,000 or $7,500 or whatever, be sure that you properly endorse it, so that you're not giving up your claim to additional settlement payments and additional negotiation regarding what you're owed, because most of you are owed millions, if not billions of dollars. And these sneaky, crafty, commercial flim-flam men have a long history of trying to offer a pittance, a few pennies, and then calling that the settlement, that you accepted the settlement they offered, without ever them telling you that this is being offered as a settlement. Okay? They just send you a check in the mail, and if you cash it, then they say, oh, well, they settled their estate. And they take all the rest. So you don't want that $5,000 check. You want that 500 million check. Okay? Let's be honest here. We're not talking trivial amounts that are owed to you. So don't take the bait. And in the meantime, we are doing everything that we can to make sure that you have other avenues to access fungible wealth that you can use to stay afloat and keep your lives together in the midst of all this maelstrom. Endorsing, if you do endorse, if you're truly desperate and you just have to go ahead and cash that check, cash it with a notation accepted for partial payment or partial settlement.
Or how about a gift? We did that with the COVID.
Or you could do it as a gift, but then you have to keep a copy of what you actually endorse on the back of that check, front and back, so that if there's any question and you come after the rest of your settlement and they say, oh, well, we show this is already settled, you'll have it in your hot little hand. And someone else brought up the fact that many checks are just automatically deposited. So in that case, you take a notation, a letter, and you send it back to the Treasury or wherever they're going to issue these checks from. And you address the Secretary of the Treasury or whoever is in charge of that, and you say, well, thank you very much for the partial settlement payment on blah, blah, blah for blah, 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 check number, blah, blah, blah. And you send that out via a priority, not registered, but a express mail priority
Mail. Mm-hmm.
envelope, and you track it and you keep the numbers on it, the labels, so you can prove that you sent it. And that way they don't have this dodge of saying, oh, well, they accepted a $5,000 settlement offer. And don't worry, I'll be right out there chewing butt and making sure that they're held to account and that they are, shamed for trying to pull this crap on people. But anyway, those are the two things you can do to preempt their ability and their claims. Okay. I know there are a lot of people that are hurting very badly right now, but it won't be too much longer before it all makes sense, and you're going to be very happy that you have already reclaimed your American infant descendant estate on the record. So there's that, and I hope that all of you will take some time out and think about your spiritual life and your emotional life and your real welfare and what matters to you and what kind of world you want. I keep saying that. We can't dictate how things happen. We can't dictate why things happen. We can't dictate the where or the when, but we can very clearly decide and visualize what. That's our talent. So let's exercise our talent this week and take a little time out for ourselves, baby ourselves. I should talk, right? I'm the lady that doesn't have time to clip her toenails, okay? But take a little time out, everybody, and baby yourself. Have that extra good meal. Sit down with a glass of wine after dinner and stare into the fire. Hold hands with your loved one and have your kids on your lap, pet your dog, whatever's appropriate, and really think about what matters, what you care about, and you'll find that there's very little that you really need to be happy. Okay, happiness is the most important thing. Feeling that we're part of something, feeling that we have a purpose, feeling that we're fulfilling our purpose. Being part of a community, a family, it's what makes all the difference in the world. So make sure that you spend some time contemplating these happy things in your life, thinking about the good things that you want to see in the world, and zeroing in closer and closer to what matters to you and what kind of world you want.
Very sound advice, Anna. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your time and your information and your energy with all of us this evening. We send our love and our gratitude for all the work that you, your family, and your team do every single day.
Thank you, Terry. And thank everybody out there who has supported and been looking out for everybody else. Thank you, rat watchers. I owe you a debt of gratitude all across the nation, all around the world. Thank you. Rat Watch is at this point becoming a venerable institution of its own. It's been on watch since 1963. So we're going to have a little celebration for it and do some toasting for the Rat Watch group. And I just wanted you to know that we very much appreciate all the Rat Watchers out there. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely. That is so awesome.
Oh, and I took 2 hours out on Sunday for a special meeting about militias, to explain militias and how militias are supposed to be organized and how the different positions in the militia are supposed to work together. So any assembly that's having problems sorting through that, we spent a whole 2-hour session on nothing but that topic for Ohio. And please go ahead and contact Lisa Schaefer and ask for a replay link, so that if you have questions about that in your assemblies, you got a 2-hour video conference about all those different questions. I'm not saying it'll answer everything, but it'll answer quite a bit.
Maybe we can post it on TASA somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a topic that's important because it's a function that we all have to deal with as part of the 4 pillars of the assemblies.
And it's the community. It's really close to everything.
Yes, it's important.
Thank you, Anna. Have a wonderful week. Hope the wind is at your back.
You too, Terry. Everybody, God bless, Godspeed, the real God. Hugs and kisses to all.
Thank you. God bless you. Good night.
Good night.
All right, folks, there we have it. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope that each and every one of you have a wonderful week. I send my love and my gratitude. God bless and good night.